All right, so my name is Andy Huff. I am the WMS and related system administrator and PC support lead for the Office of Library Technology at Ekstrom Library and University of Louisville. It's a kind of a long title. So today I'm going to kind of walk you through how to do batch renewals in WMS. And that's kind of a misnomer because we're not really going to be using WMS outside of getting our data for the renewal process. So here are the list of requirements that we're going to need to do our batch renewal process. We're going to need SIP2 connectivity, and that's something that OCLC can help you set up. That's kind of beyond the scope of this presentation. We're going to need our bulk renewal client, which you can download from the OCLC Community Center. And we're going to need a CSV file from a WMS report. And OCLC recommends using the all checked out items report, which is the report I'm going to use in my demonstration. So to get to the client, we go to the Community Center for circulation. It's going to be under the popular resources. If you see on the screen there, I've got it highlighted. It says WorldShare Circulation Bulk Renewal. You'll click that, and it will take you to the download page, and it's got a Windows and Mac version of the client. I'm going to be using the Windows version. So once we download the client, we then have to go into WMS and pull our data. So I'm going to be going into the Analytics module under the Circulation Reports, and I'm going to go to the All Checked Out Items report. And from there, we're going to let it run. And the bulk renewal client can only work on one branch at a time. So you want to make sure that under the item branch name, you choose the branch that you're going to be using. I have two selected there, but I chose Ekstrom Library for the purposes of this demonstration. And then I click the Export button, which I didn't highlight, but if you see up in the toolbar, it is the sixth item from the left. It's got, looks like a hard drive with like a arrow pointing to the right. So once you click that, this export window will open, and you'll want to select the data. And you don't want to select all, you want to select just the data, because the username is just your name, and that'll kind of mess up the renewals. So once you do that, you'll save it, and then you'll go into Excel or another spreadsheet program that you use. I use Excel, and it's going to have everything about the transaction: the branch, barcode, checked out date, title, due date, and then all of the patron information, which I've kind of blacked out on the right-hand side. I did leave the patron barcode because all of our barcodes here at U of L start with 45566, so you're not really going to see any PII that way. So from here, we want to get rid of every single column except for the item barcode, the checkout date, and the patron barcode. And so once we do that, we want to change our due dates to the date that we want to use for the renewal process. So in my example, I'm going to be basically renewing everything that was due from March 1st to January 4th. So we're going to be going through a large swath of items. And what I'm going to be doing is on the due date, I'm going to get rid of every single thing after I sort it. So I'm going to sort it by those dates. And then I'm going to copy all the filtered rows out and put it into a new spreadsheet. And then from there, I'm going to put the due date in the format that OCLC needs. And this is the format it needs. It needs to have the year, and then the month, and then the day, followed by a T, and then the time in 24-hour notation. So what I've done here is I've got it set for that top row, and then I select all of my rows that I need to fill, and then I just fill down, and it copies everything down without auto incrementing, which is something that if you just double click the little green box at the bottom of the highlighted cell, it'll auto increment the time, and then it won't work. It'll mess it up. So once I've done that, I'm ready to save this spreadsheet as a CSV file. But before I do that, I need to make sure that the headers of our file match what OCLC is looking for. So we need to have the headers exactly like this: patron underscore barcode, item underscore barcode, and then due underscore date. And I don't know if the order matters, but this is the order they have in their documentation, so it's the order that I'm going to use. Once we export it and save it as a CSV file, we're going to open up our bulk renewal client, and this is what it looks like when you first start it. It's just a nice big blank screen. It says Get Started. So we'll click on the Get Started button, and then it's going to ask for the SIP2 server details. So as you can see, all these boxes below the data center are grayed out. All of those boxes are boxes you don't have to touch. All you have to do is choose the data center. And since we're in the US, I'm going to use the US data center. And you'll see that there are what look like buttons next to local IP address, SIP2 username, and SIP2 password. Those buttons allow you to copy that information, and that information is what we're going to have to be putting into worldcat.org/config to make sure that our bulk renewal actually works. So I went to worldcat.org/config. I go to integrations under WMS circulation, and then I go into SIP2 IP addresses. And I click on this IP address here, and it opens this new form right here. So we're going to copy and paste our IP address, our SIP2 username, and our SIP2 password into this box. I'm leaving my branch as a default, external library, leaving the vendor and character encoding as a default as well. And you want to make sure that you actually check the activate button, because if you don't check the activate button, the renewal is not going to connect and it's going to fail. And I know this from personal experience. So once you've done that, you'll hit next on the bulk renewal client. It'll take you to this page, and it will ask for an input file. So this is where you're going to drag and drop, or it'll have where this green tick box is a place where you can click to open up a file explorer so you can choose your CSV file. So once you click on that, it's going to upload your CSV information. I've blanked out the patron barcode again, but it'll have a preview of what your data looks like. So it looks like everything's going to be okay. So once you've verified that, you hit next, and then it's going to confirm one more time. You want it to use the external library branch. You want to make sure you're using the New York time zone or whatever time zone you're currently in. And it's going to show you the file name, and it's going to show you the number of rows that are going to be renewed. So we're going to try to renew 2,234 items in this bulk renewal. So we hit start. So what the client does then is it iterates through every single row and it renews it. And if it succeeds, then there is a green check mark, and if it fails, it shows a message, which you can see here that it says all success here, but I've got 28 failures. And so to actually see that, you can't see that from this window. You have to click Export Details. And when you click Export Details, it will save another CSV file. And once you double click that CSV file, it will show you the input row, the patron barcode, item barcode, due date, a status, and then a message. So one of my failures here was because the item is no longer checked out. So it's been aborted. So that's a reasonable thing. And these are the links that I use to get there. So I've got the official OCLC documentation on bulk renewing items, and then the bulk renewal client download site I've also saved as a link to. And I can share my PowerPoint presentation if anybody would like it. But that's it. Are there any questions?
Yeah. Go ahead, Michelle. You go first.
Andy, I was just wondering, like, on the errors, like, I know, like, we're set at 2 renewals, I think, are allowed. If they've already hit their max renewal, will it renew it anyway or not?
Yeah, it will. As far as I understand, it will ignore all of our rules, and it will just set the due date to the due date you put in the spreadsheet.
Thank you.
That was my question.
Andy, can you limit it to a patron group to, like, say, just faculty or just externals, or is it everybody that has everything out there?
Oh yeah, you can definitely limit it to patron group. In the all checked out items report, there's a field for patron status, and you can choose that, and then export only those records. So I just chose to export everything.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, and Andy, this is Andy from OCLC. So that's great. And I think we could save a number of steps for you with Report Designer. In fact, to get the final, you just need those final 3 fields. I think we could do that in Report Designer, and where you wouldn't have to even go through the steps of Excel and sorting and getting it down to just those steps. So I think you actually can get this a lot more efficient, I think. So I'd love to, if we want to sit down, I think even the calculation of the due date, I couldn't quite follow exactly how you calculated what the due date, the new due date was going to be, but I'm sure we could probably even do that. So I think there's even some opportunities, but this is great to see, but I think there's even an opportunity to improve that.
Yeah, I think it would be great if we could get a custom report and then like save it as one of the community templates, since it's something that everyone has access to.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. Share that in the community.
Hi, everybody. This is Elizabeth from OCLC. I'm the product analyst for circulation. Andy, yes, you're absolutely correct. So the bulk renewal client, actually what it's doing is it's passing a SIP2 renew message to WMS, and it's using like the no block sort of attribute on the message, which is what self-checks machines would use if you were trying to do an offline transaction. So it does bypass all of your policies, and it'll just set the due date to what you want it to be.
It looks like Brandy might be frozen, but I think she's probably about to say that it's time for the next lightning talk, which was me. So I'm going to go ahead and get started.
I froze out of me.
No, not a problem, Brandy. Yes. Let me give me time to share my screen. Make sure I do this correctly. All right. So I'm going to talk about Digby for projects. I just put a thing in the chat window. If you all have any questions or comments about this, if you could wait and maybe save those for the breakout sessions afterwards. I just want to make sure there's 2 more lightning talks after me. I want to make sure they have enough time to share what they have to talk about. So I'm here to talk about Digby for projects. So if you don't already know, Digby is it's an awesome little app that you can download to mobile devices like a tablet or your personal phone if you want. It's there to support like just really basic common library tasks like, basic check-in and check-out, reshelving, like if you want to track browse counts. You can also do inventory. You can change item locations, and as John McCullough said yesterday, they're planning on rolling out shelf reading. I don't think that quite soon, but I think within the next year, I think. So I'm here to talk about mainly how we use the inventory thing to support projects at EKU. Also, I just want to say, so this is for me, this is the difference between the WMS has full-blown functionality. It says drag, it's got all this stuff, but sometimes you don't need dragon level functionality to just do basic stuff like just scanning things to do inventory or just checking something out to a patron. So that's the Digby app there at the bottom of this nice little bird that you can just let out into the wild and it will just do what you need it to do. So with Digby, and part of its strength is the scanning functionality. There's several ways you can do that. You can use the built-in camera feature on your whatever device you're using. The one that I would really strongly recommend if you're going to be doing a lot of project work where you're going to be just doing a lot of scanning like inventory, you want to get a handheld scanner. So that's what we do at EKU. And OCLC's FAQ recommend, I think there's a particular brand of scanners they recommend that's worked really well for us. And I noticed when I was looking at Digby the other day that you can also manually type in barcode. So like if you're out in the stacks and you want to check something out to a patient or something and you didn't have a scanner, your camera wasn't working, it gives you the functionality to just manually key in the barcode. So I thought that's just like a helpful little feature. Another really great thing about Digby is the notification. It has a very annoying loud beep. It will let you know when something has popped up. You can also set it to like vibrate. So like if you're in the quiet study zone, you don't want to like disturb students, you can set it to vibrate and it will let you know. That's what's super helpful, especially where you're just like scanning and you don't want to be keeping an eye on the screen. It will alert you when something pops up. So these are some examples of different alerts that Digby will give you if it doesn't find an item. If there's like a status, like if something was checked out and you were trying to inventory it, it will let you know, hey, this thing is checked out. You might want to, you know, check it back in so it's available for patrons to check out. And I think it will, I think the staff note there at the bottom, I think that's like a pop-up note. So if somebody's at circulation, you've added staff notes to be generated as pop-up notes to let people know there's something going on with the item or just something that they need to know. Digby will also pop those up for you. So, so this is one of the projects that we've used Digby for, and there's our wonderful employee Kyle there on the right there, and the meme that somebody at EKU created. He's been really great at helping with our inventory project. So when we first started inventory at EKU, we were using the WMS circulation module for inventory, and that was kind of a slow process. So once Digby was rolled out, we adopted that, and that really helped speed up the scanning process. Again, it was the dragon versus the tiny little bird, right? It was just a lot easier to just quickly scan using Digby. One thing to know about Digby is that when you're doing inventory, I'm assuming that you're going to eventually want to clean up your collections. Like if there's stuff that is still displaying in your catalog and it's no longer on the shelf, Digby is not going to, right now, Digby is not going to alert you. It's just going to put an inventory timestamp on the items being scanned. You will still have to go and review, run reports from WMS. So those reports include the circulation item inventory report. That's where you can see the inventory timestamp, and you get that from the FTP server. And you will also want to look at the collection evaluation report that you can get from WMS Analytics. You just want to make sure that you're aware of that. And I think that shelf rating functionality that's in the works, it may help with this, like it may help with telling you, hey, there's some stuff that's supposed to be on the shelf that's not there. And also, just to let you know too, this is the most recent numbers that I could find. So as of December 2018, which is when we kind of really did our massive inventory project in our main collection, we had scanned over half of our collection, which is about 330,000 volumes out of about 550,000 volumes that we had at the time. So Digby really helped with just helping us plow through the stacks. So another project that Digby has been really helpful with has been with managing our mold problem. Last summer, we had problems with our air conditioning unit in the library, and this coincided with we'd had, I think our facilities people had come to clean our carpets right before the 4th of July weekend, and that's when our AC unit broke. So we had damp carpet, high humidity, and that just like triggered mold, and mold just like went crazy in the stacks. So we came back and we're like, oh shoot, all this mold that we have to deal with. So how do we keep track of what materials we've had to pull off the stacks and send off to be cleaned or quarantined in a separate part of the library or withdrawn? Just there's different things going on there. So at the time we had, we used Digby to scan those moldy items as they were being bagged up for box to be put in quarantine. And then we took those lists that were generated, gave them to our staff members to go into WMS and update. So we did things like mark those items as missing, and then we added staff notes to indicate that that item was missing because of mold. And then after those books had been cleaned, we used reports, we ran a report and looked for anything that had that mold note, and then just removed it, removed that note, and then removed that missing status. I put a little asterisk there that this happened right before the ability to like batch update shelving locations came out, like in bulk, like beyond just like the 100 things at a time in Record Manager. Now I know some of you are thinking, well, you could have just gone in and just like put all those things at just a different shelving location, taking care of it at that time. We weren't able to do it when we needed to deal with our mold problem. So we've got an upcoming project that, again, we'll probably be using Digby for. We're going to be consolidating a branch collection into the main collection. And surprise, surprise, because this is 2020, we also had mold in that branch. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to deal with. So this is me just kind of brainstorming. I don't know if this is actually a process we will end up using, but we will be pulling student workers in to help us with transferring these collections. So not only do we have to physically move all the materials from that branch into our main library, we will also probably have to quarantine a lot of those things. So we're not sure if they're moldy, and we don't really want to just kind of mess with it. So we're just gonna probably end up putting a lot of that stuff into quarantine to let give that mold time to deactivate before we actually put it in our main collection. So our students are going to be cleaning those books, and we figure since they're going to be touching each thing, that's the point at which they could either inventory the item, or, and this is functionality that has just come out in Digby, is the ability to change the item location. So I think, oh, that's an opportunity where we could just have our student workers just go ahead and, while they're touching the book after they cleaned it, scan it and change the item location to whatever shopping location we're going to put them in. And then at the final cleanup project, once that we think we've got everything from that branch into the main collection, well, then we would then run a report to see what is still displaying in that old branch and then clean up those items at that point. And just quickly, I'm going to talk about the reports that are generated in Digby. Notice I've been moving things around. So that little box there is supposed to be over that little share icon there in the upper left-hand corner. So anytime you scan and you're ready to share the report that's been that resulted from your session, you can either email the report to yourself, to somebody else in the library. You can use the AirDrop function to share it with another device. And that screenshot there on the right is an example of what that report will look like in your email. So here's just a couple of screenshots of what the inventory report looks like. It's got 3 tabs. First is the summary tab, which just tells you how many items are scanned. The inventory tab is the one that has all the information that you'll need for if you need to do cleanup projects. It has barcodes for each item, and it also has the OCLC number and just other identifying information that you want to use when you're reviewing the report. And then the exceptions tab, well, it's just a record of any items scanned that just had a problem, they weren't found, or they were in transit to a different location in the library, they were missing. So it's just a place for Digby to just let you know of any issues that came up. And again, this is not the same as the item circulation report that you get from the FTP. You still have to go and get those reports in order to do a comprehensive review of your collection. So I hope I didn't go over my time. That was a lot of information. If you have any questions or comments, I think somebody from OCLC will be at the breakout session for Digby and can answer any questions. I just talked about the inventory function, but there were some other basic circulation stuff that you all can do. So thank you. Let me stop sharing.
So Jason.
Good morning, everyone. Let me get my screen shared here. That's the wrong screen. I'll try again. That'll do it. I'm going to talk briefly this morning about how to manage patron data in WorldShare circulation. I'll probably, if there is interest in this for the breakout, I'll probably start out by asking how many of you perform this function at your library. This is one of a number of things that I do, even though most of what I do is not related to actually managing the day-to-day of the circulation desk. I do help with the setup of the circulation rules. all of the policies, loan periods, all that kind of stuff. And the management of patron data is one of the things that I do for the Transy library. All of the documentation to do this is available to you in the community center, and I'll give you the URL for this page at the end of my short talk this morning. The documentation breaks down these data fields pretty effectively, I think. You're basically looking at 3 categories of data fields that you're working with for patron data management. The first one is data fields that are unique to the person's name, identity, and also unique institution identifiers for your library. So I'm just going through these, basically listing the ones that we use here at Transy. I say here at Transy, I'm at home today, but all of the ones on your screen here, the given name, the family name, institution ID are all required fields. Our institution ID is a 4-digit code. The middle name is not a required field, but it's something that Transy records anyway. So we just pull it into the system. The nickname is a good field to use. We started at Transy, and I know a lot of you are dealing with this at your institutions too, dealing with an increasing number of students who go by a different gender pronoun or a different name than the one that they were given. And so the nickname field has allowed us to capture that information at an institution level. We then bring that into the system so that we can search by a person's preferred name. And so we've appreciated having that flexibility in our system. And we don't collect pronouns or anything like that. Another thing I hope we'll talk about in the breakout talk, if there's interest, is this push and pull between collecting more information than we need about a patron, but also making sure that we've captured enough so that we can do our work. We try, as a general rule, we're trying not to collect information we don't need about the patron. The only other field in this first grouping of 17 that is not required that we do populate is the OCLC expiration date, and I'll explain that as we get toward the end of my little slide deck here. Barcode borrower category, 98% of our patrons fall under the big 3 of staff, faculty, student. The home branch is a unique 5-digit code. We have all of one branch at Transy, so that is populated throughout all of the user accounts. The next grouping of data fields, I'm sorry, before I go to the next grouping of data fields, we also use 2 optional data fields because we use a non-OCLC authentication protocol. As you can see here on this screen, we are an LDAP institution. So we also use the ID at source field and the source system field. That URN, the uniform resource name, is copied into each one of the user accounts. To get the ID at source, we simply use everything before one's @transy.edu email. So my handle at Transy is J.A. Cooper, so that's my ID in the system. And you'll see this actually repeated as we get into some of the other fields. 18 through 35 are your address contact fields. All of these fields are optional with one caveat, and that is that one of these pieces of information has to be present for your record to be considered valid and be accepted by the system. So these happen to be the ones that we collect, a primary street address, city, state, zip code, and of course a person's Transy email address. We record all of that in these fields. Again, you don't have to use all of these, but one of the data elements within 18 to 35 has to be present for your record to be valid. And then finally, you have note and custom data fields, and also a couple of fields that are specific to PASA as an ILL solution. We only use one of these. There's actually 4 custom data fields that your library can use. We don't use any of them. There's even a note field that can be used to tie to a photo of your patrons if that's something that you do at your institution. The only field within this 36 to 46 grouping that we use is the ILL ID field. And that is actually a carbon copy of the ID at source field that I talked about a moment ago. So my ILL ID, for example, would be J.A. Cooper. We saw no need to create separate ILL IDs, although that may be something that institutions want to do. So your basic patron data workflow is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You obviously have to have a way of obtaining your data. We have a good relationship with our IT department, and I may get into a little more detail in the breakout session about the evolution of that. But we basically have things set up to where we now receive this as an Excel file. I say make any necessary edits, but we've perfected this and reiterated it over time to the point that I really don't have to do much of anything to the file other than saving it as tab delimited text, going into the FTP client, which I'm going to show you next, to transfer the data to OCLC. And then I always check both the report that shows up in the FTP client, and also I'll go back over to the World Share Management System to test accounts to make sure that they did indeed overlay and that I had a good clean load. So for those of you who do get into the FTP client, this is where the other circulation, the other inventory report, not the one that Laura was referring to, will be found. For those of you who are familiar with this, I don't expect you all to be able to read this, but the line that's on the top is the one that I'm looking for. It's the report that this is sort of the output of the report that comes out. We do this on a monthly basis, and this happens to be the latest report that we ran at Transy. And the good news here, and you'll see highlighted, that's the line that I'm always looking at there, is did we have any bad records? If you did have bad records, you would have a second report listed in this particular directory, an exception file that would list the accounts that didn't overlay for whatever reason, and they would give you some indication of why the records didn't overlay in the system. And I'll just tease my further comments for the breakout session by telling you, in the past for us, the only reason why accounts have not overlaid properly is because there was a barcode mismatch. The last thing that I do after I've checked that report, to check that output to make sure there are no bad files, is I will go into staff accounts. I'll look mine up, I'll look a few other people up, and just make sure that that expiration date that I've circled there is showing up 1 year out. So when I mentioned earlier that the OCLC expiration date is not a required field, this is how I use that data. So we have our IT programmers have programmed the file in such a way that it will calculate for 1 year out for the month that we're loading the data. And this is a way that I know that, yes, this is updated information in the system. So I'll go through and do a spot check of these just for my own confidence and well-being, so that I know that these overlaid okay. So that's your patron data in a nutshell. These are some of the circumstances that might require you to change up your patron data protocols. Obviously, reformatting of patron barcodes is something that we did deal with at Transy, and I can go into that in more detail. I did talk about consideration of preferred names. If that's something that is important at your institution, you may want to consider how you capture that identity information for your people. And obviously, if you are currently using ILEAD or another ILL solution and move to Tapasa, there will be implications for your patron data management. We did not find these to be extensive, but again, there are additional fields that need to be considered if you do move to Tapasa. And of course, just ongoing and future WorldShare updates, which have changed the game a little bit over time, but really not a lot. Once we got this procedure in place at Transy, it's been a really smooth moving machine, and we now do it monthly. And you can get all of the information that I talked about and more at this friendly URL. And with that, I'll take any questions that you have about this in the breakout afterward. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. So now we'll let Kelly take over. I think I froze.
Oops, sorry, I'm trying to figure out which screen I need to share. We'll go with this. Okay. So can you see, what can you all see? Can you see my notes and the screen, or just?
We can see your notes in the screen, yeah.
Okay. I was hoping to make this, all right, I'm just going to take that away and make this bigger. Okay. Because I want to make sure you all can see this, and hopefully I'll remember everything I was planning to say. Okay, so I'm Kelly Smith at Eastern Kentucky University, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about pulling IPEDS data, and I could talk about this for hours probably, so getting it into 10 minutes was a challenge, but just to give you an overview and not overwhelm, and we could go into more detail in the breakout session. So let me get my cursor in the right place. And sorry, I'm VPNing, so there's a delay. So I don't know about you all, but when every year, I crack open those ACRL instructions, IPEDS instructions, and I'm like, okay, here we go again. What new fun changes do we have this year? What data, how am I supposed to report the data? And hopefully did I gather it in such a way that I'm able to do it? If you've never worked with IPEDS before, I don't even know, you probably can't even read these words, but there's very, very, very particular guidelines into how you're supposed to count things. And the way those guidelines are written, it's not like you can just pull that out of any of your systems, any of them, link resolver, WMS, anything. So you're going to have to massage data. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I do this at EKU. And just a caveat that I'm sure there's probably much easier and more streamlined technical ways to do it, but this is just the way that I figured out how to do it. And as Todd King, my esteemed colleague, is watching this, he might see ways that he can help me out, and that'd be great. Okay, so what I have found over the years, I've been doing this for about 15 years now, is that the way to be able to report IPEDS data is to capture all of your data as granularly as you can, because you never know what they're going to ask for. And not only that, but you can use that data for other purposes. It doesn't have to just be for IPEDS. So you can track trends and kind of use it for collection development, use it for outreach to faculty, all kinds of different reasons to be able to use this data. This is a screenshot of the spreadsheet that I have kept, and it morphs from year to year depending on what new things ACRL asks for, but then I also keep older things that they no longer ask for anymore, and then I maybe will use those in our annual reports or various places. So this is an example, and I'm just going to read through a couple of these. This is how you have to count the number of physical media items you have. Include microfilms, audiovisual materials, cartographic materials, graphic materials, and three-dimensional artifacts. For example, IPEDS identifies microforms as physical media rather than physical books. And you'll see the issue with this in a minute with WMS. Count microform titles, not the number of boxes or rolls. Okay, so you can't count based on barcode. Let's see. Yeah, so this is all the kind of stuff that you have to look at when you're doing these reports. So I'm going to walk through some options that you might think would be great. And there are great applications for this, but not necessarily IPEDS. So the collection evaluation reports that you get just in the basic analytics tab, there's a couple of issues with these. As you can see, it's only broken out by format, not subformat. So there's no way in IPEDS you have to tell the difference between whether it's print or online. And you can't do that from format. I see this row of books. I don't know how many ebooks and how many print books there are. So you have to have that subformat field that specifies what the format is. So you can't use it for that. And then at EKU, we have an interesting little twist on this, which is that We have a legacy cataloging practice in our music library. In the main call number location, they started it with, if it's a CD, like a compact disc, they started it with CD. So all of those music CDs show up as subclass, they show up in history. So if we're going to be looking at these subjects, we can't, it's not reliable because there's issues with local cataloging practices. And that's nothing wrong with OCLC. That's just the nature of our data. Okay, so then another place to go to try to get some numbers is the knowledge base, actually, in metadata and collection manager. So you can pull a report of your selected collections. This is for when you're reporting on your numbers of ebooks, numbers of e-journals, numbers of streaming videos, all that sort of thing, which are not going to have barcodes. You're not going to be able to get them from any of the other reports. So you can do this and you can get a quick snapshot of numbers, but as you know, this is not deduplicated. And IPEDS requires that the titles be deduplicated. And there are multiple titles in multiple collections. So the totals in here are way wrong. The other thing is, and this is probably something that I can do in analytics, I just haven't looked into it yet. You know, I can't leave out, I can't select collections to leave out or to pick. You know, when we had SFX, we were able to select which collections we wanted to download the KBART files for, and we can't do that here. So like the Hathi Trust, you're specifically not supposed to use. There's a bunch of things in here. Oh yeah, and then so you could see here, like every year with IPEDS, they changed the instructions, and so this year there's some kind of new instructions. I haven't looked through here to figure out what has changed, but here you can see some of the challenges we face. Report the count of only those deduplicated. You're supposed to include ceased titles, which means you're not counting on the number. You're not counting the number of current serial subscriptions. You're just counting the number of serials titles to which your patrons have access, whether it's embargoed or old or whatever. You're still going to count that title. Let's see, and include open access, but not Hathi Trust, Center for Research Libraries, Internet Archive, or similar collections unless the library owns the digitized items. So there's another thing you have to look through to figure out, okay, what type of open access ebooks are these? Okay. All right. So another option, and something that I use and struggle with, is just downloading the entire KBART file of all of the collections. And the reason this is a problem is it's such a huge file. And so like this is the bottom, the file that I pulled from 2020. File not loaded completely because it got to over 1 million rows. So in here is, again, lots of different types of things. There's like abstract only things, which I don't even care about. I don't want those at all. Audio, ebook, full text, image, indexed. I don't want that at all. You know, so there's stuff in here that I don't even want. I don't have a choice. So OCLC folks, if there is ever a way that we can be able to pick what type of coverage we want to download, that would be a very fantastic enhancement, because then I could really quickly, I mean, I couldn't do an overlap analysis, but I could at least get some ideas. Okay, so all that to say, none of those sort of pre-prepped things are going to work. You're going to have to go to Report Launchpad, and this is where Todd King, you're on the call, and thank you for everything that you do. So there's a couple of things that I get from here from Todd. There's expense reports. So we have to report on our expenses. based on those categories I was talking about. So we have to be able to say, is it print or media? Sorry, print or online, media or book, one-time or ongoing expenses. So those are the 6 factors. And so there's a number of combinations of those 6 things that you're going to be reporting on. And so in order to get that, oh, sorry, there's a delay. Okay. This is a list, this is a folder that I've taken a screenshot of all the different reports that I have to use to come up with IPEDS. So this purple section right here, it's all the KBART that Jens Arneson, I don't think he's on the call. He's our online resources librarian, and he uses scripts, and I don't know what all he does, but to split up that giant KBART file. And he helps me dedupe them as he's doing it. So if anybody wants to know how to do that, we'll have to get Jens here because he understands it better than I do. So he dedupes all these for me based on type, and then I can go from there. Inventory reports is how we have to get the item counts for physical materials. And then the payment activity, as I said, by expenses. So I have to use this whole universe of reports in order to get the IPEDS data. Then once I do it, I have to do some more coding actually in order to get pivot tables and figure out what's going on. So like, this is a snapshot of the expenses, the payment activity by location report that Todd has written. And on the left here is all the fields that are included in that report, except for these green ones. Those are things that I've manually entered. So not only do I have to do this report, but I have to reconcile it with Banner because they don't always match up. So I make a match point so I can do that, and that's a whole separate process. But I use our fund. I use the fund category to figure out what type of resource it is, and a combination of different things. I haven't done this part yet, but I'm going to add a couple more columns. I'm going to add: is it a book or a media? Is it online or print? Or is it a one-time or ongoing expense to all the expenditures? So that is like, probably there is some way in acquisitions where I can mark those things to make this report better. I just haven't had a chance to figure that out yet. So your goal, I guess, when you're trying to get all this data is to make it come out, make it work with WMS, but there's not always a field that does that. Okay, inventory reports. So ultimately, this is what I've come up with. When you have the really granular data, you can, and I don't know if any of you know about pivot tables, but if you don't, you need to because they're fantastic. Once you get all the data in a usable form with all the things that you need to know, you can really quickly get counts of them. So from the inventory reports, from that, actually the format in those inventory reports, I don't know how that's derived, but that does include what type it is. So it'll have like, if it's a DVD, if it's a CD, if it's microform. So I can use these reports to be able to match those ACRL definitions. Okay. Sorry, there's a delay with my VPN. Okay, so yeah, this is just to say that it's kind of an overwhelming process, and I think a lot of how you do this is going to be based on how big your collection is and how many weird cataloging local idiosyncrasies you have, and whether or not you have people like Todd and Jens that can do really fancy things with the data. So, okay. I think that's it. Hang on. Yeah, that's it. So I'll take questions in the breakout, and we'll talk more about analytics. I'm going to stop sharing.